Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are very excited to have you. Just one more final reminder. Alexia, thanks for the introduction, but you can see on screen, make sure you stop your video if you don't want to be seen and mute your line as well for now. At some point throughout this webinar, I'm going to try and make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to speak up and chat us your questions if you prefer to do that as well. In addition, make sure that you chat your role and your name and the organization that you are with in the chat box, and we will be monitoring that. Chris Patelli will be doing a nice job of monitoring that if there are questions that come through as well. So again, welcome everyone. This is MI 101, Motivational Interviewing, making it work at every level of your practice. My name is Jeremy Make. I am with John Snow Inc., JSI. And I'm really excited to present this webinar. This partly came out of some discussions with staff at various practices 2 learning forums ago. If you might remember when we were with Larry Mausch from Washington, he had suggested part of his communication work is around shared decision-making and collaborative care planning. And motivational interviewing really works nicely as part of that. So it really came out of that work and discussions with staff after that. So we're excited to present this to everyone. So welcome. So my goals. I want to introduce the spirit of motivational interviewing, not quite so much a firm and fast definition, but more what is motivational interviewing? What's the tone of it? What does it feel like? I also want to outline the method for assessing a patient's readiness for change. And later in the webinar, we're actually going to have a chance to role play, and I will serve as a medical assistant. I will act as a medical assistant, and we'll role play an example of MI at work. In addition, I hope that this is providing a space for attendees to try this out. Motivational interviewing takes a lot of time and is not a skill set that you can gain in a 1-hour webinar. I hate to say it. So if you join this webinar thinking, when I walk out of here, I'm ready to talk to patients and do some motivational interviewing, that's just not the case. Most motivational interviewing technical assistance or consulting or workshops really take at least a full day of participation, working with patients. Sometimes we call them standardized patients, patients who are actors first and patients second. So it really takes a full day of work to figure this out. So that's why this is MI 101 instead of 201 or 301. In addition, I'm hoping to keep the webinar as interactive as we can, which means I'm relying on you to speak up, to unmute yourselves, to ask questions. I have some questions that I'll ask of the group as well. And you can feel free, if you're a little camera shy or phone shy, that's okay. Feel free to chat your answers as well or questions in the chat box. So your goals, if you choose to accept them. I hope that by the end of this, you're able to define that spirit of motivational interviewing a little better. I also hope that you become familiar with this method, that they're really tools and a method for assessing where a patient is at in their readiness to change. Hopefully you're going to interact with me, and then you'll hopefully interact with our patient who's going to join by video a little later, Justin. Feel free again to ask questions at any time. This really is an interactive experience, and like most skill sets in communication and in healthcare, you really have to practice those. So take the time to try and practice those. If for some reason you don't get all your questions answered today, I think a really nice strategy is for practices to devote some protected time to working on these skill sets. They're hard to master in just an hour. So don't feel bad if it's going to take some time to actually sit with your team, do some observation of others, give some good feedback, and then start working with patients. So here's our first chat opportunity, and people can feel free to speak up, or they can just chat this into the chat box. These are a few phrases that I have certainly heard, and maybe providers, if you're on the line as well, that you may have said to patients. So I would like for people to go through these and tell us how many of these phrases have you either heard or have you said to a patient. So you've got to stop smoking, You need to find ways to exercise more. You have to eat healthier. You really have to limit your sugar. Just add more fruits and vegetables into your diet. That's an easy one. Have you been taking your medication? I'm going to have my MA give you a flu shot or other shot. And can you get outside more? Can you go for a walk? Can you take those 35 flights of stairs up to work every day and down? So take a moment. I think some chats are coming in. I'll see if I can monitor those chats as well. So how many of these phrases have you heard? And if you heard all of them, you win the prize. Alexia said she's heard 2 of those before. Someone else said they've heard 8. Are there even 8 on there? There are. There are exactly 8 on there. Congratulations. You're the winner. Angela says there are 3 times that she has heard or maybe experienced these phrases before. Suzanne says all of them all the time. Yeah, Jennifer, 8, but not verbatim necessarily, of course. So I don't think these are uncommon ways of trying to work with patients. And they're not necessarily bad ways of trying to counsel patients. What we're doing in this webinar today is explaining a different way of assessing where a patient is at in terms of many of these things, and giving them an opportunity to come up with their own reasons and ways of making meaningful change. So thanks for chatting your answers, everyone. I appreciate it. So how's this working out for you? Maybe people have experienced these and heard these. Maybe providers have had some of those phrases, have said some of those phrases before. My guess is that they have been failures. I had to get a cat meme in there. We got our cat meme. Check that off. Can you check that off, Chris? Thank you. Okay. Okay. We'll play a quick video.
What is the most resilient parasite? Bacteria? A virus? An intestinal worm?
What Mr. Cobb is trying to say.
An idea. Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate. An idea that is fully formed, fully understood, that sticks. Right in there somewhere.
For someone like you to steal?
Yes, in the dream state, your conscious defenses are lowered, and it makes your thoughts vulnerable to theft. It's called extraction.
Saito, we can train your subconscious to defend itself from even the most skilled extractor.
How can I do that?
Because I am the most skilled extractor.
My hope for everyone today is that you will become skilled extractors. This is from the movie Inception from 2010. It's an interesting film. It's I think one of the best films of the last decade. That's just me personally. But there's something really interesting about this idea of planting an idea in someone's head and letting it sort of fester, almost like a virus. Since we're in healthcare, we can make some healthcare analogies. So this idea of planting that seed and letting it grow, the key to this film is that you really, you find out at the end of the film, I don't think I'm giving too much away, that you can't really plant an idea in someone's head. They have to come to it themselves. And that's a great sort of intro to what is motivational interviewing. Before I jump to this slide, I thought I saw a hand raised. Dr. Care, did you have a question that you wanted to ask before we keep going on? I'll let you get to your unmute button. Okay. If you do have a question, feel free to chime in as we're moving along. Okay, so what is motivational interviewing? This is a definition from Rolnick and Miller, excuse me, from 1995. Although this idea really started long before 1995. But motivational interviewing is a directive, client-centered counseling style. It's for eliciting behavior change by helping clients to explore and resolve ambivalence or unsureness, uncertainty. I think that's a really nice definition. For the biggest reason I think it's a good definition is because it's all about client-centered counseling. This is really about breaking down those traditional roles of provider being the only one who knows what is right and wrong for a patient, and patient having to just do whatever provider says. And indeed, part of this whole webinar is about how do you make motivational interviewing work for every role in your practice. This is not a skill set that is reserved exclusively for providers or even for behavioral health counselors. This is a skill set that anyone who can take the time to listen and to honestly react with and alongside a patient can do. This is also the spirit of motivational interviewing. I haven't seen this movie. Has anyone seen this movie? I didn't even know this was a movie, but I searched spirit and this is what came up, this DreamWorks movie. So this is really about the essence of motivational interviewing. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule for how to do it. And as we go, as we talk about some of these different tools that we can use in motivational interviewing, we'll talk about the tone maybe a little more than specific questions. So in the spirit of motivational interviewing, and again, this is from those two authors that had the definition, motivation to change is elicited from the client. It's not something that can be imposed upon the client from someone else. It really has to be the client. It's also the client's task, not the counselor's, to articulate and to resolve that ambivalence. As we know, as you may know, you may have experienced, direct persuasion is probably the least effective way of resolving ambivalence. The only less effective way of resolving ambivalence, in fact, it may not even be that not saying anything is less effective. That might be a more effective way than trying to change someone from your point of view. Counseling style is generally a quiet and a listening one. MI is really about taking the time to listen and to assess. It's not about talking. It's not about, it's really not even necessarily about sharing equal time talking and coming up with solutions. It's really all about listening. In addition, the counselor is trying to help the client examine what it is in their life that is troubling for them. It's not defined by someone who says, you have diabetes and you need to take these steps to resolve that diabetes or to manage it. Readiness to change is not, I like this one a lot. Readiness to change is not a client trait. It's a fluctuating product of interpersonal interaction. So when we jump to one of the tools which shows us on a scale of 1 to 5 where a person's readiness to change is, it's really not an indication of necessarily or entirely where that patient is. It's really a reflection of that give and take in the room with the patient. Finally, the therapeutic relationship is more like a partnership. It's a companionship. It's not quite so much, here's the expert, they know best, and you're a patient, you're the recipient, and you are being delivered information and knowledge that you can try and figure out on your own terms. It's not that. Okay, so when can MI be used? Well, here's just a few of the examples, the evidence-based examples of when MI has worked for diabetes control, for pain, heart disease, adhering to medical advice of any kind, eating disorders, HIV risk. And actually, MI started as a means of working with patients with substance use disorders. Mostly it started with drinking. And then smoking cessation is a good one to use MI for. But really, what do you got? I challenge folks to find something where motivational interviewing wouldn't necessarily work. I'd be hard pressed to find something. If it's something that the patient wants to change, and if it's a problem for the patient, then it's something that MI can help with. So, what can you do? There are 3 different modes, I guess I want to say, for how to actually listen and assess for where a patient is at in terms of their readiness to change. We'll start by explaining what OARS is. That's the acronym, OARS, and then a confidence conviction scale, and then the 5 different stages of change. So let's jump into those. So OARS, OARS. This is the method for just listening for where a patient is at. It starts most importantly with open-ended questions. Now, I could ask a closed-ended question of the group, but does anyone know what an open-ended question is? I'll give you a hint. That's a closed question. So open questions are really questions that provide an opportunity for a little more discussion, a little more dialogue than just yes, no, or just 1 or 2 word answers. So even where are you from is a 1 word or 2 word answer, right? But in addition, closed questions like, did you take your insulin today? Have you had your flu shot? Those are closed questions because you can really only answer them yes or no, and they don't provide a lot of opportunity for discussion. Remember, one of the keys to motivational interviewing is this give and take, this companionship with a client or with a patient. In addition, affirming for a patient, this can be affirmations. These can be positive affirmations, things that let patients know that you're hearing them and that you respect and honor where they're at in their lived experience. In addition, reflective listening is a nice skill to use when you're doing MI. Reflective listening is a little different than summaries. Reflective listening is almost an instantaneous reflection of what you just heard. So yeah, sounds like that's tough, right? That's a good reflection if someone just said, I'm really having a hard time, okay? Summaries, on the other hand, or summarizing, is a longer sort of synthesis of the things that you've talked about for a longer period of time. So at the end of an encounter with a patient, you don't want to just walk out of the room, right? You really need to summarize what is it that you learned, what's going to happen next, and then maybe what's the next step after they leave the clinic that day. So that's ORS. In addition, we have this confidence conviction scale. So this is a sort of complicated slide. I'll go through it slowly. So there are 2 questions that you can ask patients to help assess where they're at in their readiness for change. The first question is about how convinced are they that the change they want to make is an important one for them, right? So an example of that in practice might be, how convinced are you that stopping smoking is important, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're not really sure, you're feeling ambivalent, and 10 is you are convinced, you know for a fact stopping smoking is vital to your health. Where would you put yourself, 1 to 10? In addition, the second question is about your confidence. So regardless of what the patient says to their conviction scale ranking of 1 through 10, the confidence question also has to follow it, which is, if let's say the person said that they were a 4, they were convinced, they were only about a 4, they were not super convinced that quitting smoking was vital, but they were thinking about it maybe. The confidence question is a similar 1 to 10 scale, but it's really about how confident are you that if you were more convinced that quitting smoking was important, how confident are you that you could make that change? So again, it's not the most intuitive slide and question-to-question series, but I will show you in practice how it can be done pretty seamlessly, and it'll help provide a nice warm handoff opportunity for like a behavioral health provider to come in and know exactly where their confidence conviction scale is. You'll notice sort of, let me see, can you see my, yeah, you can see my mouse. So if someone is feeling like they are not particularly convinced that this is a change that they want to make, and they're feeling like even if they did think it was important, they're not really sure they could make that change, they're probably feeling pretty helpless and they're really feeling stuck. In particular, they might be just totally cynical, like I have nothing that is wrong with me and there's nothing that I want to change. The goal is generally to move patients towards this high conviction, high confidence box up here in the top right. I have one qualm with this slide though, which is that it really defines success as getting a patient to say they're totally convinced this is a problem and they're totally sure that they can make the change. So I crossed out this success thing because I don't think that success is defined by these hard and fast scales. I think success is really defined by the patient. And that's kind of a theme that runs through motivational interviewing. Okay, so let me take a quick pause and see if there are any questions up to this point. Again, I know this is sort of a confusing slide, so I want to give people an opportunity to look at it, to digest it, and then to ask any questions so far. Okay, so we'll keep moving. This next slide is really about the stages of change where a patient could be, 1 through 5. Starting at the top, the first place most patients come into a clinic having zero idea that they have anything that they think they need to change, certainly not that a provider has even said to them. They're really probably in a pre-contemplation mode. That means they're not even really thinking about this as a problem or something that they want to fix. The second stage, number 2, is contemplation, which means that patients are thinking about that there's something in their lives that is amiss, but maybe they're not quite sure what to do about it, but they have thought, this is really important to me. So someone who says that they are on that confidence conviction scale, someone who says that they are convinced, I am a 10, I know this is a problem, but they say that their confidence in fixing the problem is a 2, they are probably dead smack in a contemplation mode. It means they're thinking about it, they just aren't quite sure where to go next. So that's 2, contemplation. Moving from there, 3 is preparation or determination. So this could be someone who maybe knows that there is something they want to change in their lives. They are confident, or maybe they are not totally confident in how to fix it, but they're ready to start making some movement towards fixing. So they are preparing to do that, right? That could be very simply coming into a behavioral health session and making time to figure out what to do next. It could just be that they've talked with their family and their kids said, we really want you to stop smoking. They're probably past thinking about it and at the point where they're determined to make this change. Moving down from there, number 4, action. Right? This is the point at which patients are actually taking meaningful steps towards correcting the problem as they see it. And then finally is maintenance, number 5. And maintenance is probably one of the hardest parts of this. For those who work with patients with a substance use disorder, you know that maintenance can be really, really hard. And that's why you'll see on the right side here, this relapse arrow, because really at any time, but certainly during action and maintenance, relapse can occur. And that means that you really have to start all over again. Patients generally, if they start to relapse, will have to go back and think about, is this something that they want to try again, right? So that would put them in a sort of contemplation or preparation mode. Or maybe they are in relapse and withdrawal is too difficult and they don't want to even think about this being a problem and they won't try again. That would really put them in that pre-contemplation phase. Okay, so again, these are the stages of change. Okay, so, I forgot. About 80% of clients entering counseling are only in the pre-contemplation, contemplation, or preparation and determination phase. We mostly think, I think often providers and anyone will think people are ready for action at any time, or they're ready to start maintaining at any time. It's really not the case. And in fact, if I had to break this down a little farther, I would guess that it's a significant portion of those 80% are in 1 or 2. They've barely thought about it and they're barely ready to take any action. So I'm going to ask Justin, who is on the call as well today, to start his video if he can. And while he's starting his video, I'm going to explain this role play that we're going to do. So this is a role play that we're going to do with a patient, Justin. And I'll tell you what was on the chart when he came in, when he made his appointment in a moment. But just for now, you'll know that I'm going to serve as a medical assistant. And what I would like for participants to do, if there are teams or if there are individuals listening in, I'd like you to tally how many times you hear me as medical assistant use one of the OARS skills. I'm going to jump back to the OARS skills. So that's open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summaries. So I'd like you to tally how many times you hear me in this short encounter ask an open-ended question or reflect or give a summary. In addition, I'd like people to write one verbatim example of each of those OARSs. So if you hear me ask an open-ended question, which is something like, well, tell me more about X, Y, or Z, Justin. That's a pretty good example of an open-ended question. So you can tally one open-ended question and then take down verbatim what that was. This is a little test that I'll ask for answers afterwards. Okay. So before we jump into the encounter, here's what I got on the charts. Justin called in for a sick visit. His name is Justin Schwartz. He's a male. He's in his 30s. He called in with a possible infection and wants an antibiotic and some pain relief. Okay, so Justin, we can see your video and maybe just do a quick sound test. Can we hear you okay?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank
Awesome.
you very much, Justin. And for folks, if you're on video or if you can see videos, feel free to watch the videos as well. The video of Justin and my encounter. So again, just keep this tally going of how many times you hear any of these different things and then write one verbatim in each category. Okay. Oops. Okay. Hi, Justin. Thank you for coming into the clinic today. My name is Jeremy. I'm a medical assistant. Can you just tell me what brought you in today?
Yeah, I think I have an infection. I need to get some antibiotics.
Okay. And I just took your vitals, and it looks like your respiratory rate is a little low, and your blood pressure looks like it's pretty low. Is there anything happening right this moment that I should know?
No, no.
Okay.
I feel okay.
Okay. You feel okay in this moment?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming in today. Again, I want to make sure that we address all of your concerns today. I'm just going to take a brief history, and then I'll have the nurse practitioner come in and speak with you. Do you have any questions before we begin?
No.
Okay. So can you just tell me what brought you to this clinic?
Well, I have an infection. I believe it's an abscess.
Okay. You said you have an abscess. Where is it?
It's on my arm.
On your arm? Okay. Okay. And when did you first notice it?
I've actually had one before. I thought it had gotten better, but it's been a few days now that it's just kind of been obviously infected.
A few days. And how many days is a few?
3.
3 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most importantly, we want to get that addressed, and we'll make sure that the nurse practitioner takes a look and assesses it. And then you said you wanted an antibiotic for the infection. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm here really, is just to get some antibiotics.
Okay, great. And you know, this is something that we actually ask all of our patients, but since this is the first time in the clinic that I can tell, can you just tell me a little more about your background? Where are you from? Tell me about your life up to this point, as much as you're willing to share.
Well, I moved here for the summer from Vermont just to try and make some money waiting on tables. I've been here for 6 months now. I'm just kind of living by the beach. It's nice.
Sounds like a pretty nice life.
Yeah.
Great. And what are you doing for work? Can I ask?
Yeah, I wait tables.
Wait tables. Okay. And can you tell me about any past medical conditions that you've had?
I haven't really had any medical conditions. I've had the abscess a couple of times, but not really anything too crazy with the medical.
Okay. Okay. You've had an abscess a couple times. Is it in the same place?
Yes.
Okay. So I just have a question, and I don't want to pry too much, and feel free to share as much as you're willing. And it's actually important that you know that this is a confidential place. So anything that you want to share will be shared only with myself and with the nurse practitioner. This is not something, unless there is an urgent concern about you hurting yourself or hurting others. Everything you say today will be confidential, just so you know.
Okay.
But again, I don't want to pry, but I've noticed some abscesses before on people, and I don't know too much medically, but I thought that someone had said that maybe that comes from drug use.
I think mine is from IV drug use, yes.
IV drug use, okay. And do you want to tell me a little more about how long you've been using?
I've been using different substances, but I would say I've been on the heroin for probably 2 years now. The needle I had got really dull, and I think it was dirty, and I think that's why I have the abscess.
Okay. So for about 2 years, and most recently this needle was dirty and may have caused the abscess?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Before we go any further, Justin, I think it's important just to say, thank you. Thanks for sharing this. I imagine this is not the easiest thing to come into a doctor's office and start talking about. So thanks. Can you tell me a little more about your use? How often are you using?
Well, it depends. I mean, I said I was waiting tables, but it's really hard to keep a job. So I can only use what I can afford. And basically, I'm not even getting high. I'm just getting well. And that's not even happening all the time as it is now. So, I mean, I'd love to be able to use more, but I just can't afford to, really. And that's it. I don't really know. Probably get high twice a day, or I use twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, just to be able to survive.
So it sounds like this is something that is really, in some ways, almost keeping you alive, is by using. Am I hearing that right?
Keeping me alive and killing me at the same time, I think. But there's no way. I don't know anybody who stops using unless they die.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I said early on is that we want to take care of your concerns today, and we want to make sure that the nurse practitioner, can help you out in whatever way makes sense for you. Can I ask about if you've considered trying to stop using?
I tried to stop once. I went to a 30-day treatment program, but I mean, I wasn't really ready. I had pressure from family, and I thought I wanted to stop, but I didn't.
Family pretty important to you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen them in a long time because I just don't want them to see me like this.
if I had to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're not really that convinced and 10 is you're really convinced, how convinced do you think you are that this is something that you want to change or that's important to change?
Oh, I mean, I would definitely think it was a 10. I don't think it's possible, but if I had to pick something, I would say 10.
So it's a 10. It feels like it's really vital for you.
Yeah, life sucks.
But I heard you say if you could, but it sounds like you're not very confident that you could make a change if you wanted to.
I mean, I just don't know anybody who's been able to get off and stay off. So, I mean, I wish I could, but I don't know how somebody even gets off this stuff.
Does it help to know that we might have some resources that can help you if you are interested, if you do want to come back and have a discussion another time?
I mean, resources are good. Antibiotics would be great, though.
Sure. And absolutely. And I should have said, like, we will get you antibiotics, right? We want to make sure that we're taking care of that infection right away. That's most important. Well, Justin, before I grab the nurse practitioner, do you have any questions for me about your care here at the clinic?
No.
Okay. So I'm just going to share what we talked about with the NP, and we'll be right back in just a moment. We'll make sure we've got the antibiotic ready to go.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you very much, Justin. Before I actually introduce Justin, I want to just get this tally of how many times in, what was that, a less than 10-minute interview, how many times did you hear, let's do affirmations. So you can either chat or speak up. How many affirmations did you hear with me and Justin? And Wes says he heard 4 affirmations. Fantastic. Okay. 8 affirmations, someone said. Man, I didn't think I was that good, but okay, great. 3, 4 at least, great. And then how many open-ended questions do you think you heard? Just take a rough gander. Chris, how many did you hear? He wasn't keeping tally. Someone said 17 open-ended questions. Yeah. Does anyone want to share an example of an open-ended question that they heard verbatim? Maybe Angela, you said that you heard at least 10. Do you want to share with us? You can unmute your line and just tell us one that you remember.
When you asked regarding the drug use, I was pretty open-ended.
Yeah. Was it something about, can you tell me more about how long you've been using or about how you've been using? Yeah.
Well,
someone said, tell me more.
Yeah, you started with saying, you know, when I've seen these types of wounds on the arms, it's usually from drug use. And then you went on to say, you know, I don't know verbatim what you said, but I know it was an open-ended question.
Yeah. This is good. We've got a couple other answers coming in. Tell me what brought you in today. Tell me more of your background, what you're willing to share. Great. And thank you, Angela. Thanks for speaking up and telling us what you remember. So I just want to quickly get a sense from folks of where they think Justin is at on that confidence conviction scale. You may notice I only asked one of the 2 questions, but I kind of knew what his response to the confidence one was. So can anyone tell me where they think he's sitting on this, you know, within these 4 quadrants? Feel free to speak up or chat which quadrant you think Justin is in. Wes says upper left, high conviction, low confidence. Kat or someone all health says stuck. Yes. Vicky, high conviction, low confidence. Yep. Yep. Frustrated and stuck. It's exactly right. Justin said he was a 10. He knew this was something that he wanted to change, but he said, I have no idea. I'm not going to be able to change it. What did he say? Something about the only person who stops using is someone who dies, right? So he's really feeling totally helpless on this confidence, on the confidence side. He's really down here, maybe a 0 or a 1, right? But his conviction that it's really important is up here in convinced. So yeah, high conviction, low confidence. He's feeling frustrated. So, and thank you everyone for chatting that in. So looking at the stages of change or the readiness to change, where do we think, if we know that Justin's about a 10 on the conviction scale, very low on the confidence scale, we can kind of guess where he might be in terms of his readiness to change. So where do you think he is on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? 1, again, just hasn't even thought about it. 2, he's thinking about it, not really sure what to do. 3 is he's thought about it. He knows there's a problem, something that he's wanted to change. Where do you think he is? And again, feel free to chat, or you can unmute yourself and speak up. 2, Eric says from Rocky Mountain. Yep. Vicky, 2. Jennifer. Yep. Yeah. Contemplation. Yeah. Between 1 and 2, Brenda says. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think he's sort of smack dab right in the middle of 2. The reason I thought that is because it sounds like he has had some of these conversations with his family. It sounds like it's something that's not working out particularly well for him. He said it's the only way that it's keeping him alive, but on the verge of death in some ways. I don't think he's quite thought about what steps he could take to improve his situation and his life. So I think he's smack dab in the 2. Okay. Any questions about how we assess for where Justin is at? Again, feel free to unmute yourselves or chat into the chat box. Okay. Brenda said the family had conversations with him, not the other way around. Ah, yes. Brenda's defending her maybe Justin's in the pre-contemplation or between 1 and 2 modes. I agree, Brenda, absolutely, yeah. So his family confronted him. It wasn't the other way around. And that's really important because it means that maybe maybe he hasn't really taken the steps to think about this, to contemplate it. Cool. Okay. So what's next? Well, here are the small list, to be fair, the 3 things that I think you cannot do with Justin, whether that's the provider that comes in, if a behavioral health counselor is the next person that comes in, or even if as an MA, I wanted to keep moving on with Justin before I got the NP. So here's the things you can't do. You can't move the patient to action, right? If he's at a 2 in the contemplative mode, you can't really jump more than 1 spot. Trying to jump from, even if he's not totally thinking about it, to, okay, here's the steps you can take to make the change, it won't work. So you really can't jump to action. In addition, you can't tell Justin what to do. It's just not going to work. And you really shouldn't even suggest changes that might help at this point. Now, this is totally counterintuitive. Like, I get this. Don't think that I am, first of all, I'm not an expert at motivational interviewing. But I do know that suggesting the changes too quickly mean that you might push the patient away and they might not actually be willing to make those changes because it's not what they think is going to help them. But here's the much longer list of what you can do. And there's lots of good stuff. You can ask Justin what would make him more confident. So he said, I'm a 0, I'm a 1, right? Well, tell me a little bit about what would make you feel like you had a fighting chance here. Knowing that you've got some resources, what would make you feel more confident? You can fulfill your promises, right? So I promised him of sorts that we would make sure we got him an antibiotic. If for some reason I can't fulfill a promise that I've made, it's an important discussion that I have with the patient. So if the provider is going to come in and say, like, I can't give you an antibiotic, or I can't give you a pain medication, the MA also needs to come in and say, here's why, right? And that needs to be a conversation. But generally, we can fulfill these promises. We can fulfill the promise of, if you want to come back and have another conversation, we welcome you to do that. We can fulfill the promise of making sure that he, gets everything he needs today, whatever. You can also ask the patient what he wants to do next. So after his visit today, after he's got the antibiotic, like, what's next for you? Do you want to make another appointment? Do you want to come back here? I would make it an open-ended question. So what is it that you want to do next after you leave this visit? You can also make a warm handoff to behavioral health. This is a great opportunity for that. For those that don't have a behavioral health counselor in their clinic, so if you're a very small clinic and you don't have BH help and support, if you're co-located potentially, then, or your coordinated care, then this is an opportunity for someone with motivational interviewing experience or collaborative care planning experience or someone else. It might be a nice handoff opportunity. I would suggest this doesn't necessarily go straight to the provider to do, but maybe a co-visit with the provider and someone else, a care manager, even a high-performing MA, someone who's able to then put into place, some action that Justin wants to take next. In addition, you can offer to continue caring for the patient. So, listen, this was your first visit. We really appreciated you coming in today. Thank you for being here, and thanks for being an advocate in your healthcare. We welcome you to make another appointment. We can do a follow-up appointment. We can do a phone call. I'd be happy to check in with you in a week, but we want to make sure you're walking out of here knowing that we've got your back. And finally, you can schedule another appointment. Okay, so those are the things you can do. So what do you want to do? What would be the next thing that you might do with Justin? If you were the MA, or if you're whatever role you are, what would be the next step for you? And this is an opportunity with, on this webinar today, this interactive webinar, I'm going to encourage people to unmute themselves. You don't have to jump on video, it's okay. But unmute yourselves and I think Justin, speak up Justin if you're not, but I think Justin is ready to answer any questions that might be in the spirit of motivational interviewing. So is anyone feeling particularly confident or like it's a skill that they want to try to ask Justin a question for what's next? I imagine there's some trepidation, and that's okay. We had one person ask, can you tell me what risks you know about IV use? Justin, you want to respond to that?
Sure. So some of the risks of IV use would be, first, overdose would be my first. And, the risk of spreading diseases, STDs, the law, because getting caught with needles is really bad. Yeah, probably those first and foremost.
Thank you, Justin, for answering. And Eric just had a quick question. He just wanted me to repeat what I'm asking of people. So I'm asking for a question that is in the spirit of motivational interviewing to help progress the conversation with Justin. So this could be as your role, Eric. I think Eric, you're also an MA, so you could act as an MA in this situation, even as clinic manager, right? If someone needed to call you in because behavioral health wasn't at the ready. So just what's a question that would help you get at what's next? We had another one from Angela about, would you feel comfortable talking to one of our behavioral health providers today? Justin, how would you respond to that?
where I was at today, I probably would have said no because I just wanted to get antibiotics. Like I was on a mission. But I would have been open to it if I had to speak to them before I could get the antibiotics. Does that make sense? Like I just wanted to get in and out.
And then someone else asked, what would you like to do after you get the antibiotics? What's next for you, Justin?
I don't know. It could be, that abscesses are so painful, and I would probably just want to go use so that I could dull that pain. But I think as somebody who is seeking antibiotics like that, I could be coaxed into doing things, if even for a sandwich, in those days, like anything, because I had nothing. So I would have done just about anything if I could get something out of the deal. Health, though, was not important.
Justin, thanks for doing this role play. I'd like to formally introduce you now and say thank you for joining the webinar. And then I'm hoping maybe you'll share your story so people can have a better sense of where you're at now. And then as we did with the role play, sort of where were you with that role play? So
Sure.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, my name is Justin. I live in Louisville, Kentucky now. I was in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, waiting tables, trying to make money, and I had some friends out in Louisville, and I came to Louisville. I continue to use drugs here, and wow, you found some stuff. I continued to use drugs here, and I was living in somebody's house, and they found out I was using in their house, and I had to leave, and I had nowhere else to go. So there's a homeless shelter here in the city that had a treatment program. That's a 6 to 9 month program that I completed. It's residential, and it's completely free. They don't take any money. They don't take insurance or anything. And I currently am the operations coordinator at that homeless shelter that saved my life almost 3 years ago.
And that's called the Healing Place. Justin, anything that is important to know I've told you this is the team-based care collaborative, mostly team-based care folks who just went through some trainings and some webinars actually on medication-assisted therapy. And I know that
Yep.
you are, that you're hesitant about Suboxone and methadone. Can you say more about that?
Well, for me personally, when I was on Suboxone, I would abuse it and I would sell it to get the drugs that I wanted. I'm abstinence-based 100%, but it does work for some people. I just wasn't one of those people. I really had to hit rock bottom. And I think something that providers need to understand is that when you're an addict or an alcoholic or a junkie, whatever, word you want to use, and you're at your bottom, it seems like there's no way out. And so that's why I was more than willing to do this and share some of my story, was just because I didn't know anybody that had recovered from heroin and led a sober life without replacement drugs or medical assisted drugs. And I think for detox, they're great because they make detoxing a little better. But for me, I had to go through every ache and pain, and it kind of changed who I was and made me who I'm into now. And I didn't even know who I was when I was on the drugs because I was not the same person. But just knowing that, we all pretty much think we're going to die when we're abusing heroin through a needle, because that's all you hear about. You don't really hear about the success stories. So that's why I'm out and in the news and doing everything I can just to be I left, all the guilt and shame behind, and I'm proud of my accomplishments. And if I can help one person along the way, then I've done my job.
I met Justin in Kentucky a couple months ago, and he shared some of this story. And I'm so grateful, Justin, that that you're here, that you're alive, that you're working at a really great organization like the Healing Place. And there's a few comments from people. Eric said, congrats. Vicky said, wow, thank you for sharing your experience, Justin. So I'm super grateful. This webinar was almost designed around hearing your experience and knowing that, yes, we know the facts, we know the statistics that, that medication-assisted therapy is a really effective thing for most people, the majority of people. But for you, Justin, if I had asked you about, would you be willing to try coming in, while you're in withdrawal and doing some Suboxone strips, you probably would have said no, right? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, because I mean, I could always get Suboxone even for free when I was dope sick, but I would lay there dope sick and not take the Suboxone because I knew the minute I took Suboxone, I'd be able to get heroin and then I wouldn't be able to feel it. So I would lay there sick with Suboxone in the nightstand and not touch it.
So, any suggestions that I would have made probably would have fallen on deaf ears in some ways. And that's really the spirit of motivational interviewing. Those are some of the takeaways of motivational interviewing. It's really about the spirit of being patient-centered, not trying to make the changes for the client, but asking the client what changes are important for them. In addition, assessing by listening, by being inquisitive, almost being a journalist, right? Open questions, affirming, reflecting, summarizing. Using that confidence conviction scale is a nice way to determine where you think the patient is at in terms of their readiness to change. Remember, you can only really move about one level at a time in those stages. You can't jump 2 or 3 notches. It just won't work. And then success is defined by the patient. So those are the important takeaways. We have barely any time left. I think we have 60 seconds left for a few questions. I've Justin said if we could share his email address, and then his work number is up here as well. If you have questions for me, please feel free to ask us by email or by phone as well. But I'll leave the last few seconds to anyone who has a question. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Chris chatted that he will be sending out a link to the evaluation. So we hope that you'll just take a few minutes to fill that out. But any questions before we finish the call? Okay, well, again, we're making a recording of this webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining today, and most importantly, I want to thank Justin and say thank you for being here on the webinar with us and being alive to tell your story. So thank you, everyone. I hope you found some value in the webinar, and we look forward to seeing your feedback. Take care, everyone.